I was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, USA. My father came from County Galway, Dunmore, County Galway. My mother from outside Athlone, County Roscommon. So I have Irish connections, and I have all my relatives here in Ireland as well. Now, when I was very young, no, my father went over to the United States. He immigrated to the United States, you know. And when World War I broke out, he joined the American Army. And because of that he joined the American Army, he was entitled to automatic citizenship. And when he came back from the war, he was in France during the war, and the Germans were pushing that gas over the trenches. He got a whiff of the gas, and it sort of weakened his heart a bit, right? So every 4 or 5 years, he'd have to go to a military hospital for treatment. And then one Sunday morning, when my mother, my brother, and myself were getting ready for Mass, we went in and said, "Dad, come on, it's time to go to Mass." And we went into the bedroom and he was dead. So that left my mother with 2 young sons. I was about 9, 10 years old at the time, and my brother is 2 years older than me, about 12 years old. She had, relatives over there that she could rely on. But one of my uncles told her, he said, he bought a farm over here while he was working in America, in County Westmeath. So he told her, he says, "Look, I'm taking my family over to Ireland and we're going to stay there because I'm going to work the farm." He says, "Why don't you pack up with the 2 boys and come with us?" That happened. We came to Ireland, and that's how I got my first foot in Ireland. The war broke out in 1938. It was about 10 years before that, something like that. Anyways, we got over to Ireland, and we had to go to school here, of course. I went to school in Athlone. And my brother wasn't too happy with it. He wanted to be back in America, and I was crazy about it because I was around with horses and everything around the farm, So fast forward. The war broke out in 1938 when Hitler went into Poland, and the war started. So we had to get in touch with the American Consulate at that time, and I didn't have embassy status. It was the Consulate. So we wrote to the Consulate, and they said, "Stay put where you are. We're going to try and organize a ship to take all Americans out of Europe. And you be ready to have your bags packed and be ready to go in 2 weeks." So we were there, and we were waiting and waiting and waiting, and time passed again, and the Consulate wrote to us and they said, "Sorry, we can't take you because the ship we organized with Hitler to let the Americans go across the Atlantic is full. Now, you're in a neutral country, so you don't have to worry. You're safe there. So just put safe there and don't worry about it. And as soon as we can get another agreement with Germany for a self-passage across." Anyways, time passed. My brother became 18 years old, and he joined the American Army in Belfast. Did you ever hear of the Rangers, U.S. Rangers? But anyways, he was the first member of the U.S. Ranger Battalion, and they were trained by the British forces in Scotland. And then, because the British forces in Scotland they could kill you with 2 hands, I mean, they were tough. So anyways, he went into the first battle the Americans fought in North Africa, and they fought Rommel all the way through Africa, through Sicily, and up into Italy to the Anzio beachhead in Italy. And his battalion were told to infiltrate through the German lines at the beachhead, in Anzio. And when you get past them, blow up trains, everything, just make a whole mess of the place, And so his captain, one day his captain said, "I'm sorry, fellas," he says, "we're surrounded and we have to surrender. We have to give up. So he says, now here's a good point. He says, if you have any German souvenirs that you took, like a logo off a dead German or a swastika or anything at all, he says, dig it deep and bury it. Because what the word came from headquarters in Berlin, that if they find anything of German on you, execute them immediately. So anyway, he was taken prisoner, he was brought over to Germany, and he was in the prisoner of war camp for about a year. Now that's the story. Now, in the meantime, I wanted to join too. I was 2 years behind him. I wanted to join. So come time for me to be 18 years old, I got in touch with the American Consulate, and I says, I want to go to join the American Army. They said, okay, we'll arrange all the papers for you, and whenever you want. So I told my mother, I'm going, and you know, we had a little bit of crying and all that. So anyways, went up to Belfast and joined the American Army in Belfast. I wasn't trained, and they didn't know what the hell to do with me. So they said, what we'll do is we'll hold you here for a while, and then we'll send you over to Europe, over to England, and see what they can do with you, you know. So, so the time passed, and finally I wound up in England, and then into what they call a replacement depot, where all people who are going to the front have to make sure their kit is all, you know, fixed up, you know, because they don't send you on the front lines without your full kit. So anyways, then it was over to France. Now here is where I began my war. The word came of going to Southampton on a troop ship across the English Channel, on a troop ship, darkened ship, because the German U-boats used to try and sneak down the channel, and if they saw a troop ship, that was a beautiful target for them. You throw a torpedo into it. So we got into Le Havre, but we couldn't get into the port because of all kinds of sunken stuff around, and we had to wait until daylight. About 11 o'clock at night, we couldn't smoke on the open deck because if you take a puff of cigarette, you can see if it's 20 miles away or 10 miles, 20 miles away. So anyways, we're up there talking to some of the other guys, and all of a sudden, all hell broke out in Le Havre. Rockets flying and machine guns going and flares in the sky, and we said, oh Christ, the Germans have broken through. And we were on a troop ship with no guns and no equipment. What in the hell are we going to do? So about 10 minutes after that, over the PA system on the ship, the word came, it says, now hear this. He says, as of midnight tonight, all firing will cease in Europe, the war is over. Right? We were happy, you know. So the next day we offloaded on from the ship, and then we started. And then they looked at our records, my record, and there was a hell of a lot of other guys there too, you know, who are Americans, and they were brought over when they were young, and they'd never been to America, but they're American citizens, right? So anyways, so they looked at my record and they said, we have to train you, you know. So they sent me and all these other characters to the Compiègne Forest, and they had a big training base there, you know. And we started being trained. And we had to go through all the M1 rifle, the carbine, the bazooka, the hand grenade, the fire grenade, rifle grenade, the whole thing. We qualified in everything, you know. So they told us how to, when you go up to Germany, because, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I have to backtrack a bit. The war was over in Europe, but it wasn't over. You know, the Hitler Youth didn't want to quit. And there's a surprising thing that a lot of people don't know. The Hitler Youth says, I am fighting for the Führer and for the fatherland. It was for the Führer and then the fatherland. It wasn't from the fatherland and the Führer. So they were diehard. They wanted to kill everybody. Well, most of them wanted to kill everybody. So we had to go, we were trained. I mean, let's make sure we were ready to go. And then got word that I was going to be transferred up to Germany. So anyways, we were up there, and I was assigned to the 72nd Quartermaster Division, headquarters company of the 72nd Quartermaster Division, which I have a few pictures here I'll show you. And that's how I started. Now, we were told when we got to Germany, no fraternization with anybody, the women especially, because they're the ones that wanted to use you for chocolate bars and cigarettes, and, you know. And then the second set was, there was fraternization, you know. And then there was the denazification program, where we had to tell the people over there, you know, about Hitler and what he, you know, teach them how, you know, how to be a bit free, say. And then the Nuremberg trials. That's when they got rid of all the Nazis and either killed them or put them in jail, right? So then we were told, look, we want to cultivate the Germans. So they took our guns away. And they said, you walk around town with no guns, and to show the people that we're not savages and they want to rape your women and blah, 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 and all that. So when they saw that, they eased off a bit. Now, I'll show you pictures of some of our billets, you know. But I was there for 2 years, and then I had to wait until I had enough points to go back to the States. When I got into France, I had an automatic 12 points because I was there in the ETO, the European Theater of Operations. And then I had to accumulate 8 more points to be able to go home, back to the States. So finally, the time came and I went back to the States. Now, that was my time in Germany. I had good times. I had a few rough times. I had times that I wasn't sure, and I could tell you a story about that if you ask me later, but you know. So that's, I got back to the States, and I got a job in Watertown, Mass. With the gas and the Boston Gas Company, and I hated it. Everything to me was bland. You know, I got up, got the job, went to work, came back, eat the dinner, went out for a few beers, and the same thing, said, this is not for me. I want back into the excitement again. So I was in Boston one day, and I was walking down by the harbor, and I saw this cruiser, Navy cruiser. It looked lovely, you know, not a big battleship, but it's a smaller. You know. So anyways, I saw that, and so then I was walking back to get the subway to get back to Watertown, Massachusetts. So I saw this recruiting officer, it's a Navy recruiting officer. And I walked in and I says, oh, by the way, I was a sergeant by that time, you know, when I got out of the Army. I said, by the way, it says, you're recruiting, aren't you? And he said, yeah. He said, you want to join the Navy? I said, well, I saw one of your ships out there. And I said, it looked nice to me, you know. And he says, well, he says, do you have had in military training? I said, well, I had, you know, 2 years in the Army. And we said, and you came out a sergeant? Well, he says, I tell you what. He says, we can take you in, but we can't give you the rank of a sergeant, the pay of sergeant. He says, we might give you the rank of a corporal, the pay rate of a corporal. So I says, okay. I said, I'll think about it. He says, you come back tomorrow and make sure you're ready to go. So anyways, next day I went back to the recruiting officer, and I said, yeah, I'm ready to go. But I says, I have to be very square with you. When I was in the Army, I said, my arches began to fall, you know, from walking around. And he says, well, he said, we don't do much marching in the Navy. They said, report to, report to station. First of all, go back and tell your folks and everything. And he said, you know, and he says, and then report back here. And he says, we're going to send you down to a naval air station in Quonset Point, Rhode Island. He says, and we'll see what we can do with you, you know. So that all happened. I went down to Quonset Point, Rhode Island, and this is how I got into the naval part of the aviation part of the Navy. And I was there, and you know, we were pushing planes around, and so while I was down there, they said, we have to train you with something a little more than just pushing planes around, you know. So they sent me down to Memphis, Tennessee, to the U.S. Naval Air Technical Training Command to be trained as an engine specialist, you know, not as a propeller-driven engine. So anyways, I went down there 15 weeks and did the job, and passed it with flying colors, and then back to Quonset Point, Rhode Island. And wait a minute now. While I was in, I have to go back again. While I was in Belfast, President Roosevelt died. Harry Truman took over, you know. And Harry Truman added on an extra, the Korean War broke out when I was at Quonset Point, Rhode Island in the Navy. The Korean War broke out, and Harry Truman put on an extra year on my 4-year enlistment, so I had to stay 5 years in the Navy. So that's how I got into the Korean War. But anyways, what I was going to say, then when I was at Quonset Point, I loved that, because being an engine specialist, I used to be with the test pilots, the Navy test pilots, and what they would do is they would call for somebody to pre-flight the engine of the planes. And that means that you had to make sure that the tire pressure was right, that the engine oil full and hydraulic oil, the gauges are working, and the horizontal horizon is working, and everything like that, and the wing fold, the wing, you know. And then when the test pilot comes out, he'd say, is it ready to go? I'd say, yes, sir. And he said, sign the yellow sheet. I had a yellow sheet. Now, that plane belonged to me. It didn't belong to the pilot. It belonged to me until he signed it. Then it belonged to him. He could take it anywhere he wants, you know. So anyway, some of them were very great. They say, Casey says, that plane ready to go? I said, yeah. I said, you want to do a walk around, sir? And he said, no, you say it's okay, I'll fly it. You know? So anyways, then the Korean War broke out. And I was called to the personnel office, and they say, pack your bags, you're going to the West Coast to take a small aircraft carrier out of mothballs. So I went to Alameda, California, where this aircraft was mothballs. And they took it over, and they were taking all the gasoline off the guns. It was well preserved. Everything was just goo, you know. So anyways, we were assigned to the flight deck division. Now this is where I've seen a lot of deaths, would you say, you know. I happened to have a very close call myself, but I'll tell you that later. But anyways, we got the thing ready to go, and then it was down to San Diego, California. That would be our home port from Alameda, California to San Diego, California. And it was a funny thing because everybody had cars, you see. We drove across country, you know, to get to, they were allowed to do it. They gave us 2 weeks, we got a little holiday. But anyways, we got there, and they said, if you want to bring your car down to our base in, he says, we'll take it on the flight. We'll take your car on the flight deck of the plane, of the aircraft carrier. And here was the aircraft carrier with about 200 with private planes, and they was tied down, and off they went to down to Southern California, which would be our home base, and they offloaded there, you know. So we were waiting, and we were getting ready. They were redoing the flight deck. They were putting girders under the flight deck to make it safe for flight operations. Then I'm coming to the end now, pretty close to the end. Then we got the word that we're headed for Japan. So they loaded, and I have show you pictures, they have loaded the flight deck with all kinds of jet planes. They have jets at the time, you know. And we had jets for the Army, jets for the Navy, jets for the Air Force, and jets for the Marines. And the whole flight deck was just loaded with planes, you know. And we went over to Yokosuka, Japan. That would be our home base in Japan, Yokosuka. And they offloaded the planes there. And then they took us out and they started testing us of flight operations. So we qualified for flight operations. They tested the catapults and all that, and the resting gear and everything. And so finally they said that we're ready to send you out with the fleet, the 7th Fleet over there. Now the 7th Fleet was where the big carriers were, those big, what we call attack carriers. Our carrier was a baby flat top. It was 16,000 tons. The big carriers were, some of them were 28,000 tons. They're twice our size, you know. USS Barocco, CVE 115, you know. And it had 2 catapults and it had 2 elevators, you know. So anyways, I was assigned to the flight deck as a plane director, a yellow shirt, the guy that brings the pilots up to the catapults, and they load them on the catapults and they shoot them off, you know. We would trail a target behind the carrier about 200 or 300 yards. And the planes would fly out one by one, and they would, for target practice, it was a wooden float with a red flag on it, right? And the planes would go out single, not all together, I mean, you know, and they do a figure-8 turn on the target. They'd go up about 3,000 feet, maybe, and go down and shoot, and go and pull up and come back and back, shoot, and pull up. Oh, we thought it was, you know, lovely to see the guys, and they would see how many pilots hit the target. Well, there was one young pilot there, and he got up, and he was going down. He wanted to hit that target. And he started shooting, boom. He disappeared like that, all the way down to the bottom. Didn't have a chance to get out. There's a few other things like that, you know. When I was at Quonset Point, Rhode Island, they formed a squadron out of brand new jets, and they gave it to the Quonset Point Flyers to test a squadron of jets. So they said, invite your families and everybody to see this operation going on. So the squadron, 12 of them, went out over Narragansett Bay. And then there was the commander of the squadron and his wife and 2 kids. And there was other people there, relatives of the pilots of the squadron, and even everybody in the whole compound was going to watch this display, because we never saw jets in operation before. So they went out over Narragansett Bay, and first of all, just to show how fast a jet can go, all we had is prop planes at that time. And they said, now look over to the west there, or east there, and he says, the plane is a little dot in the sky, and watch it come in. And all of a sudden, you know, and God, what is it? You know? So the squadron went out, and they did their aerobatics, you know. So finally, the squadron was coming in one by one to land. And the commander of the squadron was the last one to land. The rest of the planes were down, and his wife and his children were there to watch him. So he came up he came in over the field, over the runway, and he took a 90-degree turn to go straight up. And he did. And then he did a turn to the left, and it took his tail wheel off, his tail rudder, his tail off. And he couldn't do anything. It was straight down into the drink, killed. I was on the catapult team at one time. I first went over there, to shooting off the planes, and we had a runaway on the catapult. The catapults are hooked up to the plane by a bridle, and the cock, on the thing, and the bridle goes around that and it goes up to the wings, and it tensions the plane, and the pressure is on the plane, and you can feel it shake like that, and then we push the button, it goes zoom. Anyways, it so happened this one night, the bridle slipped off the shuttlecock. That was the one that shoved off the shuttlecock, and he was on full power, and he's going down, and we said, "Oh Christ, he's not going to make it because he's just going to flop over the end of the runway of the plane, of the ship." But he was going, he knew he was in trouble, so he shoved it forward, and everybody's saying, go on, So he dropped below the level of the flight deck, and we could see the tip of the propellers picking up the water and having semicircles, of water. So finally, he almost belly flopped into the ocean, but he for some reason he had enough wind over the wings to keep him up, and he made it, So things like that, When MacArthur was on a push, as we call it, he would call everybody in. He called anything that had a gun and could fire it, So we would probably go up for flight operation up to the hangar, the flight deck, and we'd shoot them off at about 6 o'clock in the evening, the squadron, shoot them off at 6 in the evening. And they'd be out of a career, and they would do their dirty work, and they would come back and refuel and go back again. And we do that for 3 days and 3 nights, and we never hit the rack. We slept on the flight deck. We got to feed, we got to get to feed, all right. But we just sit there, Now, you see, our home port was San Diego, California. Down here to San Diego. And then we were out for seat trials and all that. And then it was over to Yokosuka, Japan, and Kobe, Japan. And we were down to Okinawa and down to Formosa. We showed the flag to Red China in Formosa. And we just went around Okinawa. Sorry, it went to it's Taiwan now. It used to be, I forget what it was. Anyways, that's the drill. Show the flag. We support these 5 guys. We were in Yokosuka, Japan, our home port in Japan. That's what we call it, the home port in Japan. That's how we operated from, and. We were we were tied up to the pier, and now back. I have to go because I'm going ahead of myself. In every ship, there's a thing called a contaminated oil tank. The contaminated oil tank. Now, any hydraulic oil, any engine oil, any kind of grease, anything at all goes into this tank. And some of the tanks are almost as big as this room. And they're supposed to purge that tank at about 150, maybe 200 miles out at sea. So there's no fumes in that tank when it hits the port. So they thought that the contaminated oil, this contaminated oil tank you know, what do they call it? You know, pumped out.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
But there was still some fuse in it. Now they called a Japanese welder to do some welding on the side of the ship, and on the port, on the port that takes the fumes out, there's a big red circle, and anything red you don't touch with a pin or a and I remember well. I was in charge of a section of the flight deck. I was rated at that time second pass, which would be same as a staff sergeant, and my crew would be up, and after I eat the main meal, you know, in the middle of the day, I would waste for about 5 or 10 minutes before I went up on the flight deck, because I'd tell the guys at turn 2 after you eat, you know. And I got up and I put one step on the flight deck, and all of a sudden, it took a carrier, 16,000 tons, and it took the arse end of the carrier and go boom, 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 boom. And an explosion. Well, it so happened it killed these 5 guys just like that. And one of the guys was so badly with the flash. It was a flash that went through at the aft end of the ship. It took the skin off his hands. He was going up an iron ladder, and it took the skins off. All he had was the bones on the thing. But anyways, that's what it was called. Any person with the yellow shirt is the one that directs the pilots. Nobody else can to do it. All they have all kinds of colors. They have red for pyrotechnics, and they have a red for fuel and all that. But the only man that can tell a pilot what to do, you know, spread your wings, cut your engine, you know, is a yellow shirt. And he is the key man. He's the boss man. Well, there's more than one man, because we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yellow shirts working. One night, we had flight operations at nighttime, a darkened ship. Darkened ship, by the way, you can't smoke on, you know. And we had been flying with the fleet into Korea for 3 days and 3 nights, whatever it is. And we were up on the flight deck, and we were up against the island. That's that part of the ship where the superstructure is, you know. And we were snoozing away. And this guy here was having his constitutional up and down the flight deck, you see, which he wanted to do to get a little exercise, right? And when he came back from the tail end, from the arse end of the carrier, he was going back up to the bridge into his sea cabin. He had 2 cabins. He had an inshore cabin and a sea cabin. Lovely bed and everything like that. And he was walking past us, and he says, "Good evening, sailors." And he says, "How are you?" "Tired, sir." Somebody shouted up, "I says, you're young, you'll get over it." You know, you want to hit him, but you wouldn't dare, you know. But anyways, he went up to his cabin to go to sleep, and here we were. We couldn't be relieved. And then, okay, when I got out of the Navy, anybody that served in the military, in the United States forces, when they get out, they're entitled to what they call the GI Bill of Rights, which means that you can go to any college or any school or any training unit, and the government will pay for it. So I took advantage, and I went to a school in Hollywood. You know, I stayed in the West Coast after I got out. I went to school in Hollywood to learn how to become a radio man, radio announcer.
Really?
3 years, yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it was good. It was very good. Oh, Jesus, you know, the pronunciation and all. You know, some of the people here you see on television, they're not trained. You know, they monotone. But anyways, then they said to me, look, there's an opening down in the film department. That's where they have all the commercials, and they have them all lined up at 2:45 plus 3. So and so has to go, and I'd line them up on the rack and bring them up to master control, and they would do that. So, anyways, in order to stay in that film department, I had to join the Film Editors Union, and I'm going to show you something in a minute. You had to join the Film Editors Union, which means I'm a member of everybody that works in the movies in Hollywood, right? Film editing. So I was there. I left KHJ and I got a job at ABC Network Television as an editor. It was an editor putting together promos for the live shows, not the live shows, the hit shows they had on television at nighttime, And we would make them every year. They're different every year, And then finally, I was making good money there, and I loved it, because I did everything. I put music and sound effects, and I made the dubbing sheets for all the music to come in at a certain point, and out at a certain point, and up at a certain point, a gunshot here at a certain point. But then somebody told me, said, look, you're not going to get anywhere in this business unless you go out to the movie studios. So I went up to the Film Editors Union, and I said, look, I'm with Network Television, ABC, and I want to get out into the movie studios. And this guy, the business manager of the union, said, happens to have an opening out at 20th Century Fox. Would you like it? I'd take it. So I went out to Fox, and that's how I started. I had a 16 millimeter Bolex camera, and everything, we used to take motion pictures, take, film. So anyways, I said, well, I don't know what to do. So then I said, maybe I should do it to give my mother something that she gave me, because she was a great woman. She gave myself and my brother really everything they could budget-wise. We were members of the band, and we go out in school outings and everything, So anyways, so I said to myself, what the hell can I do? Now in Athlone, there was about 1, 2, 3 acting professionals. So I said, I'm going to go. And I rented a place in Athlone and opened up a studio. I went up to Dublin, and I got all the thing, and got in contact with the suppliers and all that, and I opened up. And you know something? I made it from the word go. Because the other guys were who were doing photographs in Athlone were not quite the mark, and I was giving them something different. As I told you, I photographed 900 weddings. I came to Athlone in 1971. I started up the studio in about 1972, and my last wedding would be in about 1993. There's my wife there. Her parents own a chemist shop on the square there. Her name is Leo, L-E-O. She's dead now. She died of cancer, She's dead, about 15 years, something like that, We got married in Barna, County Galway, small little chapel, small little church. We didn't want a big thing, just a family of both. And that was it. We had good times together,
And did you meet her here?
I did. She was, when I was doing photography, the Athlone Musical Society used to hire me to take shots of the rehearsals and all that, and then at the performances. And she was the secretary of the musical society, and that's how we got to know each other, you know. And after every performance, this is when it would run a week, you know, whenever it ran. After the performances, we would go to a pub, to a hotel. No scroungy pub. We went to a hotel, and we had great fun, you know. So that's how we met and fell in love, and boom, got married.
Lovely. And what's her first name?
Margaret, Mags Leo.